Catherine the Great was never supposed to belong here, not to this land, not to this language, not to this court, and that fact stayed with her for the rest of her life, because even after decades on the throne she still thought in another rhythm, another logic, another inner tempo, one shaped long before Russia ever became hers. She learned Russian late, slowly, painfully, and even when she spoke it fluently she preferred silence, preferred writing, because on paper she could control tone, intention, distance, while spoken words exposed hesitation, accent, vulnerability, things she learned early never to show. Catherine wrote obsessively, letters, notes, drafts, fragments of thoughts, unfinished arguments, reflections she never planned to publish, and historians still argue whether she ruled an empire or whether she tried to explain it to herself through endless writing, because in many ways writing was her only safe space. She slept badly for most of her life, suffered from chronic insomnia, feared the deep night silence, and often kept candles burning until morning, not for symbolism, not for ceremony, but because darkness meant loss of control, and control was the only thing she truly trusted. Despite the image of confidence and grandeur, Catherine was deeply afraid of chaos, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that grows unnoticed, the kind that starts with people thinking too freely, speaking too openly, questioning too much, and she watched for it constantly. She believed emotions were dangerous when left unmanaged, especially her own, which is why she trained herself to appear calm even when she was furious, affectionate even when she was calculating, detached even when decisions weighed heavily on her. And this discipline slowly turned into habit, then into personality. Catherine hated public rituals more than most people realized, the endless bows, formal dinners, stiff ceremonies, but she understood their necessity, because rituals were not for her comfort. They were tools, ways to remind others who stood above whom, without ever raising her voice. She rarely trusted people fully, not lovers, not advisors, not friends, because trust implied dependence, and dependence implied weakness, and weakness was something she believed rulers could not afford even privately. Her relationships were intense, short-lived, and often misunderstood, not because she was reckless, but because she separated affection from power with brutal clarity. Once someone crossed the invisible line between personal closeness and political relevance, the relationship changed instantly, often ending without explanation. Catherine feared ridicule more than hatred. Hatred could be managed, suppressed, redirected, but ridicule spread silently, corroded authority, made obedience feel optional, and she watched satire, jokes, whispers with more attention than open criticism. She admired philosophers but distrusted philosophy in practice, loved the idea of enlightenment while carefully limiting its reach, believing ideas were like fire, useful when contained, destructive when allowed to spread freely among people who did not understand consequences. Catherine rarely spoke about her childhood, and when she did, she reframed it as preparation rather than trauma, as if admitting vulnerability would retroactively weaken her authority, even in memory. She believed solitude was the true price of power, not danger, not assassination, not rebellion, but the inability to speak honestly without calculation, to relax without observation, to exist without being interpreted. Even in moments of leisure, Catherine planned. Reading was never just reading, walks were never just walks, conversations were never just conversations. Everything fed into a mental archive she constantly updated, revised, and used. She despised incompetence more than corruption, believing corruption could be controlled, negotiated, absorbed, while incompetence destroyed systems from the inside, without even understanding what it was breaking. Catherine often revised her own opinions, but never publicly, because changing one's mind openly looked like uncertainty, and uncertainty invited pressure. Instead, she adjusted quietly, slowly, making it seem like decisions had always been inevitable. She was acutely aware of her image, not out of vanity, but survival, understanding that perception often mattered more than truth, especially in a court where loyalty shifted with narratives, not facts. Her greatest strength was not intelligence alone, but patience, the ability to wait, to observe, to allow others to make mistakes first, and patience, over time, became her most reliable weapon. She understood that power was not taken once, but constantly renegotiated, reaffirmed, defended in small, invisible ways, through habits, routines, expectations, and unspoken rules. Catherine ruled not by constant force, but by exhausting alternatives, making resistance feel pointless, not dramatic, not heroic, just slow and unrewarding. She rarely celebrated victories, because victories suggested closure, and she believed nothing in power was ever truly finished. And even at the height of her reign, surrounded by symbols of dominance and success, Catherine remained mentally cautious, guarded, always expecting instability to return, because in her mind, power was never permanent, only borrowed, only held for as long as control remained intact. Catherine understood early that ruling was not about commanding attention, but about shaping silence, deciding which voices were heard, which were ignored, and which disappeared without explanation, because the absence of a voice often carried more weight than its presence. She was obsessed with order not as beauty or symmetry, but as predictability, believing that when people knew what to expect, they became easier to manage, calmer, less prone to sudden decisions, and this belief guided countless reforms that outwardly looked progressive, but inwardly served stability above all. Catherine never believed in absolute loyalty, only in temporary alignment of interests, which is why she constantly rotated officials, changed responsibilities, and avoided letting anyone feel indispensable, because indispensability bred confidence, and confidence eventually demanded power. She read reports obsessively, even minor ones, not because every detail mattered, but because patterns did: small repetitions, recurring complaints, familiar names appearing too often, and she trained herself to notice these signals long before they became visible problems. Despite her cultivated image of rationality, Catherine relied heavily on intuition, a quiet internal sense shaped by years of observation. And when logic and intuition conflicted, she often trusted the latter, though she rarely admitted it even to herself. She feared stagnation more than failure, believing that failed movement could be corrected while immobility led to decay, which is why she tolerated experiments, half measures, and imperfect solutions as long as something was moving forward. Catherine was deeply aware of time, not just historical time, but personal time, the slow narrowing of possibilities with age, the awareness that opportunities closed permanently, and this awareness gave her urgency masked as calm. She rarely punished impulsively, preferring delayed consequences, because delayed punishment confused people, removed emotional clarity, and made fear linger longer, turning discipline into an atmosphere rather than an event. She believed public morality was a performance necessary for social cohesion, while private morality was optional, flexible, and often irrelevant, as long as it did not threaten the structure holding everything together. Catherine did not believe people wanted freedom as much as they claimed. She believed most wanted security, routine, and reassurance, and she designed policies that gave the illusion of choice while preserving control. She distrusted crowds instinctively, seeing them as emotional organisms rather than rational collectives, capable of rapid shifts, sudden enthusiasm, and equally sudden violence, which is why she preferred governance through layers, distance, and intermediaries. Her court was deliberately exhausting, full of rules, etiquette, subtle expectations, and unspoken hierarchies, because tired people were less likely to conspire, less likely to think creatively, and more likely to comply. Catherine feared irrelevance more than death. The idea of becoming a symbolic figure while others made real decisions disturbed her deeply, and she actively resisted any attempt to reduce her role to ceremony. She cultivated ambiguity intentionally, allowing people to interpret her intentions differently, because ambiguity forced caution, and caution preserved authority without confrontation. She believed that true power was quiet, almost invisible, operating through habits rather than commands, through anticipation rather than reaction, and she adjusted her behavior to embody this principle. Catherine rarely expressed regret openly, but her private notes reveal constant reassessment, questions without answers, alternative paths considered too late, and this internal dialogue never fully stopped. She understood that history was written selectively, and she worked carefully to leave behind material that framed her decisions as necessary, rational, inevitable, knowing future judgment depended more on narrative than truth. She accepted that some suffering was unavoidable, but she refused to see it as personal responsibility, viewing it instead as structural cost, a necessary friction within large systems that could not function smoothly. Catherine's confidence was constructed, reinforced daily through routine, discipline, and repetition, because confidence once lost was difficult to rebuild, and she guarded it fiercely. She believed rulers were loneliest when surrounded, because proximity created performance, and performance destroyed sincerity, leaving no space for genuine rest. She never stopped learning, but learning for her was never innocent curiosity. It was acquisition, another tool, another advantage, another layer of preparedness against uncertainty. In her later years, Catherine became more cautious, not weaker, but sharper, more selective, aware that fewer moves remained and each carried greater weight. She accepted that legacy was uncontrollable, but she still tried to shape it, not through grand gestures, but through accumulation, volume, presence, leaving too much behind to be ignored. And in the end, Catherine ruled not because she was fearless, but because she understood fear deeply, her own and others, and learned how to live with it, manage it, and quietly use it as part of the structure that kept everything standing.